I now call to order the May 12th, 2026 Board of Trustees meeting, the time being 6:30. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Welcome, everyone. Will the clerk please take roll call?
Trustee Blackstone?
Here.
Trustee Moore? Here. Trustee Barrett?
Here.
Trustee Moyer?
Here.
Trustee Cannon?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Mason?
Here.
Mayor Daley?
Here.
Madam Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Are there any amendments to the agenda tonight? Are there any conflicts of interest with the agenda this evening? Fantastic. First, we'll move on to community participation for public comment. Now is the time for public comment. Members of the public who wish to comment on non-agenda items, please sign in on the sheet behind the podium and state your name clearly into the microphone. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to provide comments. Next item is presentations. For the first presentation, we will have Parks, Recreation, Open Space, and Trails, PROST, Master Plan and Community Center Feasibility Study Draft Presentation, presented by Billy Cooksey, Parks and Recreation Director.
Just going to make sure I've got this right. All right. Good evening, Mayor, Trustees. Billy Cooksey, Director of Parks and Recreation, and I'm excitedly here. I've got Eric Henschel, Operations Supervisor with Parks and Rec, and J.R. Clanton, who's a manager at Barry Dunn and has worked on this whole process with us to present our first draft of the Parks, Recreation, Open Spaces, and Trails Master Plan and Community Center Feasibility Study. Before we begin, I would first like to take a moment to recognize and thank our partners at Barry Dunn for the work throughout this process. Over the last year, Barry Dunn has played a critical role in helping us guide the development of the PROST Master Plan and Community Center Feasibility Study. Their team has facilitated numerous meetings with staff and the PROST Advisory Board, Board of Trustees, stakeholders, and residents throughout the community. They led in-person engagement efforts, workshops, surveys, stakeholder discussions, and public outreach events that helped us ensure this process truly reflects Wellington's voice. What stood out throughout the process was their commitment not just to collecting data, but to understanding Wellington itself. They took the time to understand our identity as a community, the realities of our current situations in the system, the challenges associated with growth, and most importantly, what Wellington residents are asking for both now and into the future. The result is a plan that is thoughtful, actionable, data-driven, and deeply community-informed. I also want to emphasize that what you are seeing tonight is still just a draft version of the PROST Master Plan. The presentation is part of the process, not the end of it, and there may still be questions we do not fully yet have the answers to. There may be recommendations, hopefully so, or perspectives that continue to evolve the discussion as we move forward in this process. That's exactly why input during this stage is so important. So as we go through the presentation tonight, I encourage and ask everyone to think critically, ask questions, provide feedback, and identify areas where additional discussion may be needed. There may be questions tonight that we don't have the answer to, and honestly, we feel like that's okay and even preferred as we move forward so we can advance this process. But because those questions and perspectives are conversations, help bring forward different angles, priorities, and ideas that ultimately strengthen this master plan as it continues to evolve. It's about continuing to refine the plan collaboratively so that when it ultimately moves towards adoption, it truly reflects the needs and values and long-term vision of the Wellington community. So again, on our behalf, Parks and Recreation and the town, I want to sincerely thank Barry Dunn and their entire team. They've probably put 4 or 5 faces in front of everybody here, but that's because they care and they're here to help work for Wellington. They're professional, they have experts, and their partnership throughout this process has been outstanding so far, with much yet to come. All right. So tonight's presentation is much more than just parks and recreation. At its core, the PROST Master Plan is about Wellington's future quality of life. It's about how we continue to grow responsibly while preserving the things residents value most about the community: connection, accessibility, recreation, opportunities, internal town commerce, and the small town character that makes Wellington unique. One of the clearest findings throughout this process is that Wellington's parks and recreation system already provides tremendous value to the community. But the plan also makes it very clear that the demand is beginning to outpace the capacity. Residents are asking for more recreation opportunities, more indoor programming, aquatics and wellness options, stronger trail connectivity, more family and cultural events, and more year-round space that bring community together. The challenge is that many of those needs cannot be fully met with our current infrastructure and available space. That is the foundation of the PROST Master Plan. Is that better before or after? Okay. That's the foundation for this plan. Understanding where gaps exist, where they exist, and why they exist, and what strategic investments are necessary to continue meeting community expectations moving forward. So the PROST Master Plan begins with kind of just one simple but important question. Why does this plan matter, and why does it matter right now? Wellington's experienced significant growth over the last few decades. As the community continues to grow, so does demand on our parks, trails, facilities, programs, and operational capacity. The plan identifies 5 major drivers behind this effort: rapid growth, rising demand, protecting quality of life, creating an actionable process, and responding to evolving community needs. The key takeaway is this: if growth outpaces infrastructure and service planning, we risk falling behind communities' expectations and potentially losing some of the qualities residents value most about Wellington. This plan is about staying proactive rather than being reactive. One of the greatest strengths of the PROST Master Plan was the planning process itself. This was intentionally designed to be both data-driven and community-informed. Over 61,000 points of contact were made throughout the engagement process. In a town of 12,000 plus residents, that is exceptional. It blows everything that we expected out of the water. We did this through public outreach, stakeholder meetings, social media, surveys, pop-up events, online participation, community workshops, and more. Again, Barry Dunn has been fantastic at getting our community to get involved in this process. The level of engagement matters because it validates the consistency of the findings throughout the plan. It's a valid plan. Residents across different demographics and engagement methods repeatedly emphasized the same priorities: recreation access, trail connectivity, and I'm going to say a couple of these things a lot of times tonight because they come up throughout the plan. Indoor recreation space, family programming is huge, aquatics and need for aquatics, wellness opportunities, and preserving quality of life as Wellington grows. The plan reflects those voices of Wellington residents directly.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to emphasize here is the statistically valid survey you all did as part of this process. It really is the gold standard for making sure the feedback we're getting is truly reflective of the whole community. We partnered with ETC to do the community survey, and through random sampling of households in Wellington, basically through statistics, you end up getting 95, 96% confidence that the the responses you got are a true representation of the demographic breakout of this community. So in addition to the 61,000 touch points, so people who are given opportunities to respond, all of the data we collected, we also get to have a really in-depth community survey we know represents the needs of this community.
Thank you. One of the clearest findings of the PROST master plan is that recreation is directly tied to quality of life in Wellington. Up here on this slide, with the graph, it represents one of the many findings from this statistically valid survey that you can see in the packet. It's in the PROST master plan draft. The whole statistically valid survey is in there if you want to extrapolate on what all it's saying. But from this specific one, residents consistently describe parks, trails, programs, events, and recreation opportunities as essential parts of what make Wellington feel connected, welcome, and vibrant. But it also identifies where current unmet demands exist. And that's really important for this process to get what is needed out of our residents, what they feel is necessary for quality of life in Wellington. Things like adult fitness and wellness, a community pool or aquatics, connectivity on trails, cultural programming for families, more outdoor recreation that's directly tied to not specific programming, and arts and enrichment opportunities to be expanded upon. What's important here is understand the why behind those priorities. Residents are looking for more opportunities to connect with the community outside of traditional recreation models. They want year-round opportunities, multi-generational programs, wellness, and family experiences. Family experiences came up a ton, and I think we all understand that's connected to Wellington. And really the spaces and broader community interactions overall, not just the athletics that we currently have.
Yeah, and I think what's great about this chart here, this comes directly from ETC. And this is one of those charts that they put together through asking several questions and then being able to take those answers and generate this. You see a lot of the different services and amenities that are being prioritized in here are likely things you've heard before. The other point I want to make here is just because something in this particular graph shows up as a medium or low priority, that's not a judgment of the current level of service necessarily. It's just saying what are the preferences for investments. And so, and I think throughout this, it's important to remember that context when you're looking at these different findings. Just because we're saying we want more of something or something different, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're saying what's currently happening is bad.
Oh, sorry, I said that. I put that on purpose. I just little comic relief in the middle of all this, huh? This slide here really gets to the heart of the system pressures identified throughout the PROST master plan. Some of the key challenges that were described by Barry Dunn. The first major challenge identified is just really limited indoor spacing. The limitation impacts nearly every other recommendation in this plan. Right now, Wellington relies almost entirely on shared facilities and partnerships to provide indoor or recreation or just programming in general. While those partnerships are incredibly valuable and we wouldn't be able to run a lot of our recreation without them, they also create scheduling constraints, operational limitations, and reduce flexibility to expand the programming that the community is requesting and generally needs. The second major finding is that youth sports currently dominates approximately 85% of participation, as noted in that pie chart, of current recreation opportunities. Now that's just recreation that we take as registration numbers. That doesn't take into account all of the events, all the park and plays, movies in the park, all the stuff that we do that we really just don't have the opportunity to count numbers on. These are just the participants that we have that come in, call into the office, go online and sign up for a registration. 85% is with youth sports. And that reflects a strong community interest in athletics, which is great, right? This isn't a bad thing. This is just the best way we have the community, or we have responded to the community's needs, because that's the infrastructure that we currently have. We aren't going to take away youth sports. Importantly, this plan also notes that we could use more sports fields to meet current programming demands, but it also highlights a major imbalance in programming diversity, which this master plan is really trying to help us to address. And then as noted on the bottom of this the demographic on the bottom of this page, this is what the community is really asking for. And I can go down the list, but it really hits on the same points that I've said. Art and culture, wellness, teen programming really comes up in this as well. And we absolutely need space and opportunity for teens. We know that this plan definitely describes that as well. Family recreation and indoor recreation year round. The issue is not a lack of interest for our community. It's not a lack of the fact that only the youth want to play sports and that's all our recreation is in Wellington. The issue is that the town currently lacks the facility capacity and the diversification of facility to meet those programs that they say they need. This becomes one of the central whys behind the plan's recommendations moving forward.
Yeah, I think those are all the key points. I think really what I want to emphasize here for you all is reinforcing it's not bad that youth sports are 85% of your registration. It's how you've responded to the needs. A healthy way moving forward is to not necessarily get rid of your existing sports programs. It's as you're thinking about adding stuff to be considering other audiences that might need it. And when you read through the demographics in the master plan, you see the shifts that are coming with your ages and your population. You see compelling arguments to be made to explore other options that might not have even been considered.
And kind of keying on that, one thing that this master plan did, oh, excuse me, sorry, got my screen is all messed up, is it dialed in a program lifecycle management plan. And this really helps us to be able to operationally focus on programs that maybe haven't hit their peak or potentially need a little bit of extra guidance into why we have them and where they go from here. The plan recommends creating a more intentional framework on how programs are introduced, evaluated, kind of modified, and then eventually phased out if necessary. This is important because as a community's needs evolve, recreation around that also needs to evolve. We have been very stuck on providing sports. And that, again, that doesn't mean it's a bad thing, but this plan is saying we now have the idea behind it to modify programs or eventually get rid of them because it's not what the community needs. Very straightforward, gives us a blueprint on how to do that and make it cost effective for the recreation department. The goal is not simply to offer more programs, it's to ensure programs remain sustainable, balanced, equitable, and aligned with the community priorities over time. This creates a strong, long-term operational model while allowing the department to remain responsive as Wellington continues to grow. So here we have some of the most important recommendations from within the PROST Master Plan draft so far. One of the strongest themes throughout the process was the need to diversify recreation, as we've just been speaking about, and improve opportunities beyond just the traditional youth sports. Aquatics, childhood programs, adult fitness and wellness, family and culture. Pickleball, that's the first time I've mentioned it, but it is absolutely dialed in here as a need for the community to expand or look to expand on. Teen engagement again, and equitable access across the community, which we'll hit a lot more on later in the presentation. And again, the why behind this is very important. A growing community needs recreation opportunities that serve residents across all ages, moving into the future as well, all of their interests, and all life stages, not just the primary user groups that we have currently. Currently, Wellington does offer some of these programs that are needed, but with lacking availability and ability, such as we have limited indoor pickleball, and we have limited adult fitness and wellness, due to lack of space and time. But we also do not have the capacity to offer other programs, specifically aquatics. Right now, the plan clearly shows that Wellington has demand for these programs. People want it, but lack infrastructure and flexible indoor space needed to provide them consistently at a scale. And that's really important, is consistently. Because we could potentially try to run a program, but if we can't consistently do it without interruptions, it is really hard to gain a base in a town of 12,000 people. We have seen an explosion in our Zumba and a kind of reinvestigation and input into our yoga. We have to keep those people. Those are just like the only two classes we have. The same people come back. We have that base. There could be so many more in our community that would like that program. We just can't offer it. And so that's why many of these recommendations tied directly back to the potential future facility or a facility that helps with relieving some of that tension on the pressure on our recreation. So. All right, I will turn it over to Eric. Good luck with that.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, hi everyone. So the PROST master plan also highlights how heavily Wellington currently relies on limited recreation infrastructure. Facilities like the Leaper Center, Poudre School District Schools, and the Boys and Girls Club all provide important value to our community. But the plan identifies that these partnerships alone cannot fully meet current and future recreation demand. And the key finding here is that these needs are interconnected. The lack of flexibility, flexible indoor recreation space limits our programming diversity, year-round opportunities, wellness programming, family recreation, and some of our community events. The community center concept becomes much more important because it addresses multiple of these identified gaps simultaneously, not just one.
Yeah, and again, here is the chart from ETC that they've put together on facility investments. And so again, this is from one of your strongest sources in terms of community feedback. And many of the uses that you see up there as high priorities are those could basically be served through the design of new interior spaces through a community center.
Okay, so our system today. The level of service analysis in the PROST master plan shows that Wellington has a strong foundational system. Similarly to our program needs, Barry Dunn professionally looked at our program system in total, all the parks and every amenity, and provided the important assessment to these assets. They scored our amenities and access to those amenities and compared them to the national standards. From this, most residents do have walkable access to parks, and many amenities meet the national benchmark standards. But this plan identifies that many residents don't have equal access to some of our system's key amenities, things like tennis courts, pickleball courts, etc. However, the plan also identifies several important concerns. We have aging infrastructure, uneven amenity distribution, like I mentioned, connectivity gaps through our trail system, and a system that is beginning to underperform relative to our future population growth. The important takeaway here is that maintaining our existing assets alone will not be enough moving forward. Future investments need to focus not only on maintaining quantity, but improving quality, connectivity, accessibility, and our long-term sustainability.
So the level of service analysis that's in the master plan it's one of the most detailed areas of the master plan because there's a lot of information in there that's really important for making investment decisions in your system. We put a lot of work into creating it. We went to every single park, all the open spaces, and we scored them, not just broadly, but actually cataloging the conditions of all of the amenities. So your play structures, your trash cans, your benches, what's in there for people to actually recreate with or to utilize. And so you get a general score up there that says fair, good, poor. But for any one of those, it's faceted. There can be parks that scored good that have maybe elements in them that are not good. right? There's elements in there that need investment. And that becomes really important when you'll see next month a capital improvement program. So recommendations on what kind of investments to make into the parks. You'll see that we'll make recommendations to invest into your good parks as well as your fair and poor. And a lot of that comes down to what's cost effective, right? A lot of times, it's more cost effective to keep good things good than it is to try to bring up one poor thing up to good. It's making investments now for a little bit that prevent full replacement 5 years from now. And so I really invite you all to look at the level of service chapter, because there's a lot of really great information in there about your system, how it's accessed, what some of the concerns are, what some of the needs and deficiencies are, and really a lot of what you're doing well. It's not all bad. And so keep that context in mind when we come back with the capital plan next month.
All right, trails and mobility. So the PROST master plan identifies trails, connectivity, and mobility as one of the major priorities for the future of Wellington. While the town has important trail assets already in place, the network remains fragmented and limited in practical functionality for everyone. Barriers like I-25, Highway 1, and the railroad create significant gaps in connectivity between our neighborhoods, parks, schools, and community destinations. The plan specifically identifies the need to improve our east to west connectivity, strengthen north to south trail connections, improve pedestrian safety, and create a more integrated mobility network overall. This is important because connectivity is not just about recreation. It affects our accessibility, our equity, active transportation, public health, and our overall community experience. So just looking at this, the areas in orange are the areas that are identified for trail connectivity needed in that. All right. So some key findings of this plan show that our current system is generally performing well, but there are clear limitations beginning to emerge. One of the most important findings is that Wellington's system currently focuses more on adequacy than excellence. Most amenities meet the expectations, but very few exceed them. The plan also identifies significant trail connectivity gaps, uneven amenity distribution, service gaps in certain areas of town, and walking equity concerns. These findings reinforce the need for targeted strategic investment rather than simply continuing to operate the system as it exists today. So one of the most important sections of the PROST master plan is the connection between recreation investment and long-term community sustainability. The plan specifically identifies parks and recreation as economic infrastructure. When residents leave Wellington for recreation purposes, fitness, aquatics, and programming, local spending leaves with them. Providing those opportunities locally helps us retain spending, support our businesses, strengthen community competitiveness, and improve overall quality of life for all of our residents here in town. At the same time, the plan also emphasizes that major recreation investments must align with infrastructure readiness, utilities, transportation systems, and long-term operational sustainability. This reinforces the importance of a phased strategic implementation for us moving forward.
Yeah. And I just want to emphasize the connection between quality of life and investment in the community. Money follows quality of life. And we often don't think of it because we think of parks and recreation, open space trails. These are nice features that we use to make ourselves healthier, make ourselves happier. But they also are reasons why people live where they live. And when people leave either to access those amenities somewhere else, that's money leaving the community. So again, it's in the report. It's an important point because again, this plan is laying out a framework for future investments to really help the town achieve a higher quality of life. And so it's important to understand the economic impacts that come with that.
The PROST master plan establishes 3 major strategic initiatives for us moving forward. Improve organizational vitality, balance resources and services with evolving needs, and create a connected community. Together, these initiatives recognize that Wellington's future success depends not only on facilities, but also on operational capacity, partnerships, sustainability, and community connection. The plan emphasizes that maintaining high-quality experiences will require continued investment in staffing, operational resources, infrastructure, and long-term planning. The PROST Master Plan takes a deeper dive into each of these initiatives. If you need to reference inside your packets, that's all outlined in much more detail there. One of the strengths of the PROST Master Plan is that it moves beyond identifying issues and provides a clear action framework moving forward. The recommendations are organized around parks, trails, and facilities, programs and services, a potential community center, economic development and sustainability, and community engagement and communication. This creates a roadmap that allows Wellington to move strategically and intentionally rather than reactively as future growth occurs in town. To wrap this up, the PROST Master Plan confirms that Wellington already has a strong parks and recreation foundation, but it clearly shows that demand is growing faster than the system's current capacity has to respond. Residents are asking for more programs, more connectivity, more wellness opportunities, more indoor recreation, more family experiences, and more ways to connect with the community outside of our traditional athletics alone that we offer. The key challenge is not vision. The challenge is capacity. And that is exactly what this plan is designed to address. The PROST Master Plan provides Wellington with a strategic roadmap to grow intentionally, preserve the quality of life, and continue building a recreation system that serves the community not only today, but for generations to come.
Yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about what's coming next because this isn't the only time you're going to be seeing this document in the next few months. And really talking about this in the broader perspective of this planning effort. Tonight is really exciting. It's exciting to get to come to you all with a master plan that is a culmination of a ton of work by Town of Wellington staff, Barry Dunn staff, and ultimately a lot of feedback from your community. It's a technical document, right? It's dense. There's a lot of stuff in there, but the whole point of it is we are making major recommendations and there's a lot of reasoning and authority behind those recommendations. And it's important that the plan can communicate that to you all as well as to the public and not only current staff, but then future staff, future boards, because this plan will be active longer than your terms. And so all that's to say, it's exciting to come to you tonight with the first iteration of the plan. We are really open to your feedback. There's going to be another rounds of editing before we finalize it. We also are developing a capital improvement program that again is supported by the plan and influenced by it. That will be coming back to you in a month. And then we do an implementation plan. So the master plan, it's broad, right? When you read the recommendations in there, you might find yourself saying, okay, but what are we doing tomorrow? Or what specifically are we going to do tomorrow? And it's intentional to be like that because we need to develop annual action plans that are responsive to current conditions and needs and also allow us to utilize the budget process to fund our efforts to implement the plan. Implementation plan will be developed in the next couple of months with staff as well. So yeah, it's exciting. Looking forward to hearing your feedback, but also coming back and continuing the conversations with you in the next few months.
All right, well, that's all we have. I want to say one last thank you to Barry Dunn and all the partners that they brought in on this. They've been fantastic to work with. It's cool to have somebody bring in as much energy as they bring. It's definitely relieving when we get on our check-ins and, we have somebody to talk to instead of just somebody who's ready to, talk about paper. So that's all we have. We'll welcome any questions that you all have for us.
All right. So in preparation of asking questions and this discussion that we're going to have, I do need to challenge the board right now because this is in a draft phase and this is the first time we've seen it. the way that it ends up being final is based off the feedback that we provide and the questions that we ask and the direction that we give. So I'm sure we'll all say thank you. I want to say thank you in advance because it's been a wonderful experience to go through the engagement process that we've done and to experience all the process with PROST as well out in the community. So I really love that. So I appreciate the efforts from all of you guys for that. But from the perspective of our board, please ask questions if there's a specific diagram that you need more information on or wonder why they're asking for trail connectivity across the freeway. I'm going to put that one out there. Please do that because these are the things that we need finalized, included in the master plan that we are going to then, implement. So we'll start with Trustee Blackstone.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you guys, especially Barry Dunn. Like was said, I appreciate you taking the time to understand the dynamic of our town. I think should be pretty easy to do if you go to any one of our events. We're a pretty, I feel like, loud crowd, which I appreciate. I do have a handful of questions just to, again, kind of in that same vein, just some kind of thoughts that I was jotting down. And maybe maybe not. Some of them are connected. So, for example, you mentioned youth non-sports programs. What?
Yes, that's a solid question. So youth non-sports programs focus on things, thinking like day camps, art programs, other, the library does a great job in the reading programs, but things along those lines, STEM programs, right? Or STEAM now. So like science, technology, education, engineering, math, art. So those types of programs are the things that they focus on, like non-youth, or other things too, like just in the gaps. So right now we serve really well from ages 5 through 12 to 13-ish. So some of that also is, the gaps from 1 to 5. What can we offer for that? What can we offer for teens? So just in general, the areas that we're missing.
Sure. No, that makes total sense. Another one kind of on that same topic was you mentioned the youth sports being dominated 85%. If you kind of compare Wellington to other towns like our size, what's a number that we should be kind of aiming for? Does that make sense? Or is that something you considered?
Can I say something real
Yeah,
quick?
please.
A lot of the statistics that come here, the ones that aren't, specifically from the statistically valid survey that come from our community. When they're looking at backing those, Barry Dunn is backing them with national statistics overall to make their recommendations. You might have a better answer to that specifically. I would say moving forward, that's not sustainable. I would say just in general, because we do have a passion for it in our community, and it is very well supported by our community. Not reducing that at all, but maybe getting to somewhere where it's closer to 60%.
Okay.
But that also just depends on what kind of infrastructure we look to present to the community and what opportunities we have. I don't know if you have that off the top of your head, what 12,000, person community really banks on. I would say that small, they're probably very individualistic, and that's what we go for. We just know we need to diversify. That's where that gets to.
Yeah, and I, like you mentioned, the idea of keeping what we have and even potentially growing that, but making sure that we're doing those other programs like the STEM programs and things like that make a ton of sense.
And another program that was highlighted too is we don't have any outdoor exploration programs. We live in Colorado, yet we have no youth programs that adapt to the environment that we're living in. So that was another thing that we could, it noted that we could expand on.
So just real quick to add to that, NRPA, National Recreation and Park Association, offers a metrics specific program where we'll basically enter, and it's something I'm in the process of doing currently, where we'll enter all of our information and they'll take geographically and town size, budget size, all that kind of stuff, and compare what we're doing versus what other similar places are doing. So that's even something that we'll have updated information for continuing throughout the future. Not something that we would have to solidly wait for a new plan to come after either. So once we get that information in, we'll have consistent numbers where that's a question we can answer
Sure.
all the time. So
And I think, again, just I'm asking these because I think it's good for, us to hear up here, but I think it's also if anybody's listening, at home, these are good, I think, examples of why we need to like increase, kind of our activities in other ways. My last one, and this is equally as esoteric. But you had mentioned that, our growth is kind of outpacing what we have. Is there kind of a timeline where you guys would be like, all right, we're at a critical stage. We have too many people like per parks. Like, is there like, I would love it if there was just like by 2023, all of a sudden the parks are, something like a hardcore number, again, more so that the community has something to be like, oh, this is an urgent matter. Like that's, I don't know what I'm hoping for. Or maybe it's 2075 and that's a comforting number. I don't know, anything on that. Yeah, population to kind of our park size. Is that something you can touch on?
Sure, yeah. If I'm not mistaken, like I said, another thing that will be coming in the PROST master plan is a pro forma for a potential community center. So that will give population statistics for that facility. What I would say just in general is this plan does note that we don't have the capacity to involve more people in our community, right? So we are kind of at a critical point where if there's not improvements made about expanding opportunities and investing in potential infrastructure to meet the needs of what the community is saying, we are just going to be stagnant. So it doesn't matter if we go to 35, if we continue and we grow, we'll still only be able to support the same amount of people that we support currently. Maybe with a little growth, but not to continue to support the amount that comes in.
No, that's exactly.
And I believe it's also saying we're also losing people. We're not giving the opportunity for everybody to recreate.
Yeah, appreciate that.
And just real quick too, this is one of those things where it's where we talked about kind of the exceeds expectations versus meets expectations. That's one of those ones where for most of those categories, we're meeting expectations. So meaning like if our population were to grow quickly or even, without us expanding those opportunities, that's where we'd start to see the fall from meets expectations to something else. So some of those numbers are outlined. I can't remember if they're in the current version, but they're numbers that have been tossed our way that will be coming out more solidly as well. So, yeah.
I appreciate that. That's again what I think folks should hear as far as the needs of the town. So, that's all I have.
Thank you. Trustee Cannon.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I've been waiting to see this and very encouraged by the draft that was presented there. Whatever the town does, whether it's a transportation master plan or a housing needs assessment study, all of these things help us to shape policy for the future direction for the town. So this is an important piece of this is an important document that you prepared, one that I was enthusiastically supporting, when we put on the budget because we need it. I read through the draft. Very informative. It's good to see where we're strong. It's good to see where we're weak because it gives us a direction we can go. I've always viewed parks and recreation, from a budgetary standpoint as, a town will provide these services for the community. And a lot of those services are just provided, as part of your paying your property taxes or whatever. But those people who use those facilities the most, they should be paying a fair share portion. I noticed on page 33 of your draft, and I'll give you the reference for this. You talked about the cost recovery for services was here in Wellington is about 11%, which is below the industry standard. So what is the industry standards for cost recovery?
So, sorry. Off the top of my head, it's divided into quartiles. The median quartile for a population this size is probably around 30%. These are round numbers, so I can talk. We'll get you specifics.
Sure.
Lower quartile is probably in the high teens. And then upper quartiles might be 50s. The most important thing with cost recovery, it's a very interesting data point to make the comparison to your peers and then have a conversation about it. ultimately the right cost recovery rate for Wellington is what you all feel is the right way, because there's so many factors.
Sure.
All we need to do is set up one self-funding enterprise operation, and that can send your cost recovery through the roof. And it's literally just one building, right? And all the other services are still operating the same way they currently are. The whole, what's an important subsidy, and what's important to subsidize comes from the community values that you all in this community share. So I will follow up and I will get you all the specifics for those comparison points. And ultimately, the most important thing I can say is have a conversation on it, but don't ever just solely make a decision based on those numbers.
No, I get that. In 2012, I served as an interim Parks and Recreation Director in Chicago suburb. And I did a cost analysis of our programming because we were offering preschool and of course all the other recreational facilities and so on. And I did a cost, and we were substantially below what was. And I think that's the current mindset of a lot of communities. Oh, we can't charge because we'll turn people away and that kind of stuff. But sometimes you have to make those decisions so that you can start actually reaching more of the community. We actually, through that cost recovery model, found that we were missing out in a peer from our surrounding communities, almost $1 million a year just in recreational fees because we were just undervaluing our services. So, that's why I was interested in that. And I understand exactly what you're saying. It's really about what the board thinks is fair, is manageable, and what the community is expecting as well. So thank you for that. That's the only question I had. So thank you.
Sorry, real quick. We did go through a analysis on this in 2021 with the board. It was brought to the board at that time, but obviously it's something that we need to go through again since we've had increasing in staff, and as everyone knows, everything is getting more expensive anyway. So that is on our radar, but we do have a current look at what it was like back in 2021 and where we were at and where we're at now.
Thank you. Trustee Moore.
Hello. Thank you so much for that presentation. Like you said, it was very informative and really interesting to see just kind of the piecing together of what something like this would look like and how important it is to be, here at the beginning. I know this isn't the beginning, but it's the beginning for us, some of us at least. I guess some questions that I have would be is there, I guess, a plan on how to prioritize or how to facet in which piece to put in first? So for example, trail connectivity or aquatics or, I wrote it. And I think primarily in order to build trust within the community, since I understand that this will be not something that'll happen next year or the next, but in order to we've talked a lot about how we need to invest in the community trusting us and trusting the programs to function. So is there a plan to prioritize somehow to feed that?
Yeah. I think the best way to describe that is, and JR touched on this slightly, they will, and we will have an actionable CIP plan come out of this. It's not going to say next year you absolutely have to start this or this or this. That's what the budget process does. And that's where we look at the entire document and we look at all the, what people really need, all the priorities, because we'll have stuff on the capital plan that might be priority number 10, but we know that it needs to happen. That's where we come every year to the board during that budgeting process and say, this is part of the master plan. Mm-hmm. How do we feel about it? The community has been saying this. We know that things change rapidly, right? Especially out in parks and recreation, different key initiatives need to start every year. So having like an actual 5-year plan doesn't mean that every year every one of the things is going to be dialed in. It will say, you need to put costs associated to this playground. Maybe it waits till after that playground, but if there's vandalism, we might need to move that up the list. So that's kind of the best way to say it. The budget process is going to take our planning process every year, and we'll make sure that it's right for the community fit.
Thank you.
Trustee Barrett.
Thank you all so much. This is really nice to see the data kind of really encapsulating just what my experience is in this town. It's pretty spot on from what my impression is as where we are and where we need to take action. My interest is figuring out what possible projects we could have that would have the most economic return, not direct, but indirect. Is there a way of tracking the economic impact and prioritizing projects based on the economic return we will get? Because, when we think about, I think you get what I'm trying to ask, right?
Yes. So broadly speaking, there are standard economic impact and economic development metrics you can use to conduct that analysis on specific projects. It's a major component, usually of feasibility studies tied to capital investments. So certainly when it comes time to actually proceed with those kinds of investments, that getting that economic impact data is something you can do. For prioritization criteria within the CIP, again, you can emphasize, Wellington as a community can say, hey, we want to make sure we're emphasizing economic impact as one of our scoring criteria. And so we can't necessarily or feasibly do, 100 economic impact studies on every recommendation, but you certainly can imagine how you can broadly track it, and more importantly, codify that you are prioritizing it and listing it as something you're considering when you are conducting feasibility studies.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Trustee Moyer.
Buckle up. So I have a lot of comments and questions here. My family partakes in your programming a lot. And so just first of all, thank you for partnering with us and helping to make this happen. To the Parks and Rec staff, thank you so much for everything you've done. When I drive out on the soccer fields on Saturday, I'm so impressed to where we've come from where we were 7, 8, 9 years ago. So just thank you so much for the growth that we've already seen. And I'm really excited for where we're going. First of all, I just want to say that the engagement piece of this, yes, it's impressive. And that's what it's going to take because it's so important for things like this to be informed by our community and data driven so that there's no question that we are feeding the community what they actually want. So thank you for all the outreach that you guys did for this. I know I've seen you everywhere. And so thank you for that. I really appreciate the proactive versus reactive theme that's throughout the plan. I think when we start talking about things like a community pool, which I think is maybe the first thing I read about on Let's Talk Wellington when I moved here, we do also obviously have to consider water constraints and all of that. So as we move forward with the capital improvement projects and how we plan things out over the next, hopefully, decades, obviously taking into consideration how certain projects can't move forward without the necessary infrastructure in place. So let's see. I would love to see in the next iteration, I think many of us have said, the priorities maybe for the next 3 to 5 years. What are those projects that we absolutely know that we need to make happen? And then also, what's the low-hanging fruit? What do we have the ability to start making change on now without much capital investment? And then the connectivity piece, I know that there's some kind of distinction we might get if we can connect Wyoming. I mean, we've talked about this with Safe Routes to School. So I'd love for the community to know about that. And just, I'd love to see that happen. I think that might be one of those medium hanging fruit pieces, possibly. But I think there's a lot that we can do. And I like that you mentioned that the connectivity piece isn't just about parks. It's about safety. It's about the community really being able to access the things that they need in a really safe way. I would love to see something about the intermediate. I know there was a intermediate volleyball offering, but the club sports, if you want to talk about revenue streams, that's a place where you can make a lot of money. So I hear. So just, considering those things, because there is an appetite here for teams like that. And I think that would be amazing to see incorporated. The economic infrastructure, I love seeing that this is infrastructure. Affordable housing is infrastructure. You just think about roads and streets, but it's not. It's all these things that make the community stand really strong. So I appreciated that. Page 9, this is just a me thing because I'm a visual person, but the gray and the colors, at first I was like, oh my gosh, why is there such a high demand for esports and gaming? But it was because I was reading it backwards. So that's a me thing again, but don't know if anyone else had that problem. I am curious. So I love that there's talk about accessibility and diversity and equity. And so how can we incorporate that? More cultural events. Yes, please. But how can we really kind of thread that throughout everything and just look through that lens, as we're planning the next steps. I have a question about the 95 to 96% certainty. How do you feel that confident about that number through the data you collected? Yeah.
Yeah, and
I'm trying to go fast.
sorry, yeah, it's statistics. I can ask for ETC to give the confidence explanation. It all comes down to random sampling.
Mhm.
So if you truly randomly sample households, which they do, they're data scientists, you don't need you need a surprisingly small number of responses from truly randomly selected people to get a truly statistically valid high confidence threshold. And it's just a standard for surveying used by all the survey companies in the world. It's interesting, but it is complex.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Oh, sorry.
I was just gonna say, our goal was 250 and
Uh-huh.
we left it open for a certain amount of time and we surpassed that by just about 75 people
Yeah,
or 65.
that's awesome.
I'm just
I'm
saying,
not
like-
questioning the level of,
Yeah.
I just think it's important for people to understand the science behind when you look at our population versus the amount of responses. It's definitely important for them or just anyone, myself included, to realize that there is a science behind that and how that does represent the entire community, at least to some degree. So thank you for that. Outdoor activities, yes, let's have a ropes course. The community center, I would love to see that kind of plan come together in the next iteration. Is that a short-term goal? Is that a long-term goal? Obviously, we need the space. We need it for so many different reasons. And there's an appetite for it. But how do we get there? And then let's see. Just looking at, we as a board need to be proactive about the budgeting process and looking at how can we give you the internal capacity you need, the spaces that you need to be able to move forward with a plan that really does satisfy the appetite of our town, because we're a family town and these are the places that bring us together. So the sustainability of it is really very important. And then also, when you look at accessibility, the last thing I wanted to say is you brought up subsidies. And so I know Fort Collins has these programs where you can apply for the scholarships for their recreation programs. And so I would just say, can we explore that as we move forward? That's it. That's all. That's all I got.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Mason.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Holy smokes, that's a little out there. So apologies, everybody. Well, I just want to say thank you, Director Cooksey and Barry Dunn, for getting all this together. Obviously, the Parks Rec, Open Space and Trails Board and staff for putting all this together. 61,000 touch points is pretty amazing for something like this. And so I just wanted to say, really appreciate you guys putting this together. It's very comprehensive. And the timing couldn't be better. Obviously, we've got strategic planning this week, so I think this is going to be very useful for those discussions. So, just a couple of things I want to say. I certainly share some of the Trustee Cannon's concerns regarding cost recovery for some of these types of things, especially as we consider larger potential projects, community centers, these types of things. Obviously, grant funding and program sustainability come to the forefront of mind for me. So obviously, if we were to consider some of these things for the future, obviously we want to have very solid plans behind what that looks like and how we're going to be able to afford those things. A lot of the things on the priorities list here require some fairly significant investment. So I'm certainly very curious to see what you guys bring forward as far as that capital improvement plan. I think that'll help the board kind of prioritize what we can and can't do with Wellington's kind of limited budget as far as that goes. But so yeah, certainly as far as the infrastructure goes, pickleball courts and that sort of thing is certainly far less expensive than putting in indoor pools and these types of things. So I obviously, though aquatics are super high on the list, it looks like residents are super interested in those types of things. So I guess I'm just curious, if we weren't able to just put a pool in the ground tomorrow, I'm just curious, what kind of opportunities do we have, in order to, provide services to residents without having some of these infrastructure. I'm not sure if, partnerships with, and I'm not trying to get people to leave Wellington by any means, but partnerships with Fort Collins, those types of things that do have amenities. Is there any way to, maybe partner with those folks that offer reduced cost services or that sort of thing? I'm just curious if there's been any investigation in those types of things.
Yeah, there has been. And we do have constant communication with them. They rescinded a outside of their growth management area. Their service area used to touch pretty much all of northern Colorado, north of their southern border. They currently do not offer that. Recreation was the last critical service that held on to that. The only thing, and this was brought to the board and it's in our budget now, the only thing that we have so far strategized is to provide rebate for those that need assistance in our community. And that's already currently in our budget. So they go down and they register for a program if they are in need and show they're in need of assistance for quality of life saving or any recreation opportunity that we just absolutely cannot provide. We will look at their case and provide them with a refund out of our budget just to support them in our community. That could be expanded on. I am in contact with the director in Fort Collins. Again, it's, are people leaving to go somewhere else? How are they getting there? Do they have the transportation to get there? So we're putting as much strain on saying, well, can we partner? But there's a lot more to just saying, yeah, like, let's go down there and do that with Fort Collins. The biggest thing that I would say with that is if we're going to look to do something like that, there are also partners that we could bring into our community to help with potential infrastructure advancement, right? This isn't saying that the town of Wellington has to build a community center. It's saying the town of Wellington needs infrastructure. Grants, partnerships, those are abound, right? And Barry Dunn is not going to stop here, right? They don't just give us the plan and say, here's what it is, here's some grant opportunities. They're in it for the long haul, right? They want to see this plan succeed. They want to see Wellington to succeed. So if we have the opportunity to have this conversation forwarded, right, and we think that facility needs to be built, that's not saying the town of Wellington has to do it. They have a lot of contacts that potentially can help come in and partner as a facility. If that's an opportunity, I'm just kind of throwing things out. It doesn't have to just be a facility. There's many opportunities, but I think it's going to be more and more difficult to partner with an outside entity for our community going there rather than potentially doing it or bringing someone in to partner with.
You bet. Thank you. Thank you. And I
Yeah.
think that was the most excellent answer, frankly. Obviously, a lot of the municipalities are getting kind of strapped for cash. So I kind of expected that maybe that might be an issue there. But excellent answer, though. And I appreciate, like I said, that you're looking into those things and very much looking forward to that capital improvement plan. One other thing I might just, well, two other things. And this one's really just kind of for the board. Obviously, I do want to keep in or just highlight that if we were to consider any new developments as part of like a metro district or anything like that, I would also encourage the board to just keep in mind public access to some of those amenities. You know, if a developer wants to come in and put in pickleball courts within that metro district, then those would have to be publicly accessible. So I wouldn't want us to go out and say, well, we need a whole bunch of pickleball courts on the south side of town when potentially, I just want to make sure that we all have the full picture when we're considering all of these things before us. The last thing I have is kind of something that's been in the community pages lately, e-bikes and these types of things. Have we given any thought to, and I don't know if there's liability concerns about any of these types of things, but a place for some of these kids to ride that is not in the parks or going 90 miles an hour on the street.
To answer your question, that hasn't been part of this process, though it's not something that I haven't thought about incorporating. I mean, we're a little far on in the process to throw something in there, but it's this is why we're having the communication, right? This conversation, it is hitting really hard, really fast in our community. So if it's something that the board wishes me to take back to Barry Dunn and have a conversation on how we can incorporate that into this plan, absolutely. You know, there's been a lot of talk. We're in constant communication with those that are helping us enforce what we can currently enforce. And we do have a lot of community feedback, getting it daily. So obviously something needs to be done. It's a very specific issue. So let me see how it could be incorporated so we kind of have a general idea of maybe what we could do with that.
Yeah, I would love to hear any ideas you guys might come up with, as long as the board is, you know, in agreement that would be something we should take a look at. So.
Okay. Yeah.
I think that's great feedback. I was just, as we were talking earlier, I was looking up the Berthoud bike park that they have, which is super cool. And it's all for non-motorized bicycle items. So, and it is a play at your own risk. You still have to follow the laws. You're recommended to be safe, you know, those kind of things. So, but this is the new age in which we are.
Yeah.
So long as someone is following the law there, you know, that is an amenity that they offer. It is very popular from what I've heard. And they've expanded it to multiple different trails for different levels of difficulty and different types of bike riders. So there are amenities out there that accommodate some things. I'm not saying that this is a dirt bike thing, which is what more of the kids I think that we're more concerned about are straight up riding dirt bikes through grass. So, but I want to throw that out there as a great amenity that Berthoud has that they've gotten great feedback on. So,
well, and this is something where if we were to add it to the PROST master plan, now that it's here, we can have that conversation. It would, you know, it could go somewhere in the action plan, right? Where we're prioritizing recommendations. It doesn't have to say what we're going to do and when we're going to do it. It just says action needs to be taken on this because it is growing in our town.
yeah.
And for lack of a better statement, it's not going to go away, right?
No.
Immediately. So putting it in there might be something we can discuss so that when we come to budget time, we say, this is a huge priority right now.
Yeah.
We need to take action on this. And it comes directly from the plan. That doesn't say what specifically we do, but that's where we come in and say, do we buy land? Do we want the appetite for the risk? You know, where do we go with this? Or what partners can we have to bring in? Where can we send these e-bikes to that is safe, fun, you know? Because there's a very long list of the action plan. I hope you all had a chance to read that with prioritized recommendations.
Yeah,
Would love to add more stuff to that, and we can have that discussion with Barry Dunn and see where they fit in.
I think that's definitely a topic to acknowledge for sure. I would recommend that one to be on there. So,
Okay.
so I'm very entitled when I say things like this, but my kids have been in swimming lessons from under 1 year old, multiple classes a year until they were at least 10, right? Swimming lessons. And I would say for the majority, that would be a common practice for people who have the ability to do those kind of things. So that's been a lot of time. When you do swimming lessons, when your kids are not in a mommy and me kind of class, I mean, under 1 year old, I'm in the pool with them, obviously. But if you're not, you're sitting shoulder to shoulder with all the families watching their kids swim, which is only so exciting the first, fourth, 10th, 20th class. So you become friends with the other parents in your class. It builds community. Not to mention your kid is learning a life-saving skill, right? That we don't have the ability to teach from a public perspective, life-saving skills to children or adults in our community when it comes to any kind of aquatics. And that is a shame that that's not available here. And that those programs, our residents don't qualify for the discounted rates unless they get reimbursed by Wellington too for any other recreation districts outside of here. So, and that's a huge commitment too. That's multiple times a week, usually throughout the summer, that you're going somewhere. So that's driving in and out of town. And then my favorite story of recreation is I did a class called Stroller Strides, where you take your baby in a stroller and then you go wander around a park and do kind of sometimes exercising, but mostly just wander around a park with other moms who are also in a similar difficult situation as you. So it's amazing community that you do. I did this in Fort Collins on the furthest park from here. It took me like 50 minutes to get there and back. So I'm talking about almost a 2-hour round trip to make sure I could do this every single day. And I ended up finding out that one of the women I was in the class with lived 4 houses from me. And we didn't know it. And then after that, because we had become such amazing friends during this, I mean, every day versus on the hardest times of my life as a young baby mom. And then I found out she's my neighbor. And then having her as my neighbor and then us being friends in real life, like in our town and in our neighborhood, is what made me fall in love with our town. And then I started like participating. And then I started loving Wellington because I had one person. And the reason I met them was through recreation. And it brought me so much comfort and joy, and is the reason why I still live here, is that one neighbor. They've since left, but luckily I've met other people since then. So military families. The other things to note for experience of recreation in Wellington is my kids play tons of recreation. They play lots of sports in Wellington. And for volleyball teams, because it requires an indoor facility, for practice, we would be at Rice Elementary back to back practices at 9 p.m. for 12-year-olds 1 year, because there's just not enough court space and time for us to be there at any given time. And I guarantee you so many families didn't participate because they just can't imagine bringing their kid back to a school at 9 p.m. at night to then do sports. So like that's the reality of the limitation of the facilities, even for the programs that we already have. So we've already breached that capacity. We're not providing a welcoming, great experience. Like I love the youth sports and it's great, but I know that other families can't participate at that capacity. So I get it. Every elementary classroom, let's say less than half the kids do a birthday party every year. So every classroom, at every elementary classroom that we have, 10 of those kids have a birthday party, not in Wellington. But they do it at Windsor Rec, Eaton Rec. They do it at other rec centers. So that's another thing too. So we're not only just not having those here, but we're drawing our entire Wellington community and taking them all somewhere else. So these are just like the kind of things that would become a lifestyle change for people if we had a facility in town, what they would experience and how they would build community. and the economic impact. So tell me more about what a trail across I-25 might look like.
Put me on the spot.
Yeah. That's a funny one on the map. You're like, wait a minute.
Well, I'm not an engineer, so specifically what it looks like, I can't tell you. But it has been identified as a key gap that really creates great disparity of all of our amenities. And that's not just recreation amenities, that's commerce amenities, that's safety amenities. So basically it's saying that for someone to get from just south of Baumgars, if they have no other mode of transportation, they've got to go all the way down under the underpass of I-25, which, might I say, was not specifically made for pedestrian transport, right? It's used for that for sure. But there are chances that it's underwater because that's what happens when it rains and it's in a spillway. There are chances that it has ice under it and mud because that's just what happens. So it's not even as safe as it could be. This plan is dictating that for someone to be able to use the amenities on the other side of the highway, it's completely unfeasible. So they're just suggesting that at that corridor at Jefferson, whether it's another under or a pedestrian overpass, that something needs to be looked into to connect all amenities in town to make it equitable for people living on the east side of the highway to access. And that's just one of the few that are dictated there. But it was something that was noted right away, and I believe it's noted in other potential plans as well, that it is a critical gap for a lot of people. And this plan does note that, and Eric hit on this, that our walking score for access to parks really isn't that bad at all. The national average, they say you need to be able to walk to a park within a mile. That's a 10-minute walk, give or take. We have a pretty good score. There are a couple areas in town, and you can see them on the plan. There's a specific map for it. It's like really red. It's like these need immediate attention to come up to national standards, which really is not good to not have access for those people. The majority do, but the spread of amenities is just what is disparaging to a lot of people. And to be able to, at least if we try to amenitize the east side through capital investment or amenity investment with capital money, that's one way to do it. But that doesn't necessarily bring everything because we don't have the space in parks already over there to put all those amenities. So this is saying it gives a better opportunity for everybody to be able to access that safer. And as we know, that's also a key transport to downtown, right? If we got through there, or the grocery store, anything like that.
Yeah.
So it's really noting that is a key area where people should be able to cross rather than even potentially, as we've seen, go over the overpass on I-25, which is not safe.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, thank you. And then as summer is approaching right now, we historically did CSU camps, sports camps, all summer long, every single week because it was super affordable. But I work from home, so I would drive my kid to CSU, come back to work, drive and pick them up and come back. So it's like any kind of summer camps or camp options, they don't exist. I was just talking to the softball coach about a 3-day camp that they're doing as a fundraiser for a softball program. It's a half-day thing. And then she mentioned there's one other that a church is likely doing. And then otherwise, there's very limited camp options in town, meaning that a lot of our kids, especially teenagers, really just don't have anything to do, but might be home when they could be doing something structured, supervised, or otherwise as well, too. So that would be really great to have. Something I was hoping to add to the actionable items is more related to infrastructure related to events. And improving event experiences, because that was something that was a high priority, was for events. But we don't necessarily have a lot of the actual infrastructure based on that, I think, in the action items. Band shells, permanent bathrooms. I talked to the Star Foundation, and their biggest expense for every event is renting bathrooms. So if there are more bathrooms that just exist in our parks, That wouldn't be a needed additional for events necessarily, depending on the size of the bathrooms. I would hope that they would be able to accommodate events. Let's please plan it that way. Power, access to power, parking for our food trucks, these kind of things that would just make event life easier, because we have proven that Wellington loves events, and all the results here are showing the exact same thing. So I would like to add more capital projects and action items related to event infrastructure. Speaking of Trustee Moyer's talk about, I don't know how you said it, but I think quick wins is usually what I say. Low hanging fruit is what you said. Thank you. But I would love to have some kind of tool or impacts effort matrix sort of tool based on the criteria that you mentioned, for us to determine what are the quick wins that we could do with the least amount of effort and resources that would have the best impact for the community or the most need as requested, as well as what are the ones that will have so much significant investment but likely not have payoff, versus those that are sound long-term investments, right? The effort matches what the payoff might be and how significant it would impact the community. So you talked about that and determining what criteria. I would love if we could hone that in and have economic impact as one of the, both of you guys, all three of you guys mentioned it, not just a recovering costs necessarily, but economic impacts. Like, how does this keep people in town? How does this impact small businesses? How does this, develop workforce even? Like those kind of economic indicators. I know that's a very wide range, but something to determine the payoff on a net effort analysis would be fantastic. And the events one was a big one of my feedback things. And then I obviously will include other land acquisition needs for facilities too, and trail. Okay. All right. That's all the feedback I had. Based on our discussion, does anybody have any follow-up topics? Just quick headline it real quick. Yes, sir.
Yeah, to piggyback on what you said, Mayor, about those low-hanging fruits and so forth like that. When we did our water efficiency plan, there was a matrix in there that talked about this is a high cost but low return kind of matrix. And we've got a lot of programming, a lot of amenities and so forth, like in this entire package and your action plans and so forth. And having a matrix like that says, yeah, it's going to cost a lot and you're going to get a big impact, or it's going to cost a lot and you're not going to get much return on that. I think I picked up on like the batting cages, for example, may not be worth putting that much money into it for a low return, based on the need and such like that. So a matrix like that I think would do wonders on this plan.
So
thank you.
Formalizing that.
Thank
you.
you.
And I think, might I just say, it's interesting because PROST has done and modified over time kind of their own similar type priority list, like high priority, large impact, how we move forward. And that's kind of what we use that minor park improvement budget for, where we go through things that are on their list, but having an action plan on all of those things in this plan was
absolutely
perfect.
And having that information and then having an opportunity arise where we say, oh, we have an opportunity to do something now, and then be able to reference that. That's
like the dock.
Yep.
That's where that came from. So
that opportunity. Yeah, exactly. Yes, ma'am.
We also say, is the juice worth the squeeze, right?
Oh, thank you. You have all the phrases.
I just wanted to remind everyone with CML coming up that if we do consider outdoor pickleball courts, there is a mental health concern that we should consider moving forward with the noise.
All right. We've talked about this. Very well aware of this sound screening requirements. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Yeah, just one last thing that I think when Brian was mentioning the e-bikes and whatnot, I think what could be helpful, which is just hopefully the least impactful as far as work for you guys, any sort of like map of the town that you guys would like recommend or is like designated for the e-bikes now, I think in your space, I think that could help with like further conversations that we have about potentially limiting other kind of available spaces like within the town, or like what that impact would be as far as like connectivity between spaces. I think that that could help me just map that's in that if we're touching on that in the plan. I think that would be helpful for me at least. So
Might want to be careful with that just based on the community feedback. Some people might object to the places that we suggest and recommend. So I think it's a good idea, just careful. Also, when we're talking about the matrix and um, the best way that we can get a return on things, I also want to kind of just include what kind of projects can address the most items, you know, efficiently. So it's not even just like addressing one project, one thing that we desire, but how can we two birds with one stone, you know, multiple items at a time. You know, recommendations that kind of also consider what would tackle more priorities, or even just a broader, like, you know, we have two orange priorities and then, you know, a green priority in there too, you know? So, you know, maybe put that into consideration when making the matrix. Yeah.
Absolutely. Between PROST and talking with Director Cooksey, every amenity has to be multi-use going forward, right? You can't build like one amenity that only does one thing when there is potential to have multiple uses of the same facility or the same amenity. So I think that's a great point, because if you're just saying, oh, this meets swimming lessons, but you know, forget that you have all the other needs of aquatics also associated with that facility, same kind of thing, right? Absolutely. Okay, any other comments? All right, well, thank you guys. Hopefully you got enough. Do you have any other specific targeted questions or anything?
No, and what I'd say is this is an ongoing process, right? So if something pops up, we can have internal communication with Patty, and Patty can relay to me, and we can, if you have any other, you know, specific things you want to see, please let us know.
Great. And they're doing the same process with PROST as well to provide some feedback and things tomorrow. So
Yep.
we'll see you guys soon then. Thank you so much.
Thank
I
you
really
all.
appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Yeah, let's take a 5 minutes recess. And we're back. The next presentation we have is the Business and Economic Development Roadmap. This will be presented by Liz Magargel.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Business Development Manager, and Cody Bird, Planning Director.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for your time. I look forward to sharing the proposed Wellington Business and Economic Development Roadmap and hearing your questions and feedback. So in your packet, you did have a copy of the roadmap, so I'm not asking anyone to read the small picture here. The proposed plan offers a phased approach to strengthen Wellington's business engagement and support foundation while building towards a more strategic economic development approach, policy alignment, and program expansion in the years ahead. The proposed plan connects near-term actions with longer-term community outcomes by creating a framework for how Wellington can support existing businesses, improve readiness for future investment, and build towards a well-planned economic growth in a way that reflects local priorities and conditions. The proposed plan is grounded in an initial review of Wellington's current economic conditions, local context, and business environment. It also reflects best practices in strategic planning, listening and gathering information first, analyzing what we've heard, and using that to guide the priorities and actions. So the focus areas in the proposed roadmap identify the core outcomes that the roadmap is intended to advance and helping to organize the near-term workaround. This includes strengthening engagement with our current businesses and building support functions, advancing Wellington's reputation and positioning as business-friendly and prepared for well-planned growth, and building alignment on Wellington's current economic conditions to help inform goals and priorities in the years ahead. The roadmap is broken into 3 phases in the near term. The phased structure provides a practical way to organize work in support of key outcomes over time, from early engagement and analysis to implementation and longer-term strategic development. The phases build on one another and may overlap, with learning happening across the phases and supporting ongoing refinement of programs and strategies as we move forward. So in the first phase, engage and listen. This phase is about building relationship and gathering direct input about what it is like to do business in Wellington and data on economic conditions in our town. The purpose of these efforts is to ground our future work in reliable information sets to create strong information bases that can then be analyzed to identify opportunities and priorities in the next steps. In the second phase, synthesize and plan. This is one of my favorite phases. It turns the information into action. By analyzing themes from meeting with our businesses and commercial realtors and understanding the market and demographic data, we can identify some near-term actions that will support our current business environment. We'll also identify larger, longer-term challenges that will need a strategic and collaborative approach to address. The benefit of these activities is a more coordinated and informed approach to business and economic activities as we move forward. And then in the third phase, this includes piloting some of those programs that we've identified and making refinements through ongoing learning, as well as building alignment on current economics and conditions and future priorities. This allows Wellington to begin putting our useful tools in place now while building that foundation again for the stronger and longer-term economic decisions. And then finally, after our near-term roadmap, this does bring us into the longer-term strategic planning. The foundation that we'll establish over those first 3 phases is will position the town into a longer-term strategic planning to achieve desired outcomes. What we're learning now will allow us to move into a more mature, intentional, and durable economic development function that can support Wellington's long-term economic health. By developing economic development strategies around a common vision and agreed priorities, we can assess the funding tools to help meet those goals and identify meaningful indicators to gauge economic progress and changes. This approach gives Wellington a clearer framework for setting priorities, aligning policy and resources, and making decisions over time. So I am going to pause there. And ask for if there are any questions or initial feedback about the roadmap before going into sharing some of the information that we have already found out.
The 2 things that I wrote down immediately is that I appreciate that there's so much emphasis on strengthening existing businesses. So I wanted to mention that. And then the other thing is relating to the word maturity that you used. Over my tenure with the town, I have seen entire systems and departments reach new levels of maturity, where we were, existing at a certain point, and then now we are operating at a completely different level than we were before. And I see that as a great term to phrase reaching maturity in economic development and how we approach that. So I do really appreciate that. Are there any other items before we get into the data? Yes, please.
I just really appreciate that there's this emphasis on listening, the same as the parks plan. It's like we're just taking the time rather than making assumptions about what people want or need. You're taking the time to do this listening tour and, really find out what's the core of what our businesses are missing and needing and wanting and need to thrive. So I appreciate that a lot. Same as our Madam Mayor said, I really do appreciate that we're starting with the businesses that we already have and need to support and lifting them up. So thanks.
Okay, please continue on. Thank you.
Right. So we're already in phase one of the roadmap, kicking it off. To understand the current conditions, we did look at some community demographics. We did conduct the Wellington Business Listening Tour. We also talked to Northern Colorado commercial realtors and development-oriented participants to really understand kind of some of the regional context and how Wellington is fitting in there as well. So a snapshot of Wellington. The town's demographic profile describes the people and households that help shape the local economy and provides context for workforce, income, housing, consumer demand, commuting, and growth trends. While we can't, reduce everything to a number, these factors do provide insights into Wellington's current position, direction, role in the regional economy, and the practical implications for the town's economic development. Wellington's demographic profile reflects a community with real strengths, family-oriented, growing households, and high workforce participation. The population distribution of over 30% 19 and under, and strong cohorts of that 30 to 39 and 40 to 49 really reinforces that Wellington's profile of a community of families in their prime earning and child-rearing years. Wellington also has a highly engaged residential workforce. But the data is showing that most working residents do leave town for employment, reinforcing Wellington's role as a community with strong labor force participation, but limited in job capture right now. The 31-minute average commute and the gap between out-commuters and in-commuters highlights both a challenge and an opportunity. Many residents rely on the regional economy for work, while Wellington has room to strengthen its local economy, its local employment base over time. We can also use this information to provide market research and other insights to our current businesses to understand how they can kind of target potential customers and support residents on their commutes, targeting convenience opportunities, and then also on the weekends as well. So not only is it kind of a snapshot, but how do we also use this information moving forward? And we can really work with our businesses to provide one-on-one support. All right. The Wellington Business Listening Tour. So we reached out to local businesses to understand their current needs and experiences of doing business in Wellington. We met with businesses representing a diverse mix of industries, from restaurants and retail to manufacturing and finance, with a broad geographic coverage over town. So I'd really like to thank the businesses that shared their time, candor, and thoughtful insights. And if I did not have the opportunity to meet with a business, I welcome the opportunity to meet with any business at any point. The reoccurring themes, which are summarized in the attachment, can be seen through topical areas. The themes summarized in that document are best understood as a whole, capturing how multiple factors do combine to shape day-to-day activities. So some of the first themes that came across, I think in almost every conversation, was around market conditions. Businesses described an environment marked by softer and more price-sensitive demand than in previous years. Inconsistent and sometimes low customer traffic and spending patterns that often occur outside of Wellington. These combine to make it harder for some businesses to sustain costs at current levels. Businesses also shared some of the operating growth constraints. Businesses described an environment where cost, complexity, and risk of starting, operating, and expanding a business can be challenging to overcome. And this is certainly, you look across all of the data, this is not just a Wellington. Several businesses shared a desire for move-in ready space when starting or expanding a business, particularly with the rising costs of new construction and some tenant finishes. Several businesses share that the combination of federal, state, and local regulations, broader market uncertainties, and operational complexities increase the challenge of opening and maintaining a business. And a few businesses did note that small incentives or grants do not significantly offset expensive projects or mitigate long-term market challenges. Businesses also described the local support and local systems. And when describing this local environment, businesses did have different perspectives and experiences, as to be expected. As we move forward, we should continue to build on the strong relationships that many businesses described with staff, with the chamber, and with the Main Street. There are also opportunities to strengthen local processes and communication and coordination so that businesses can easily navigate startup and growth, understand where to go for more help, and experience a coordinated and consistent approach to business support. And then finally, the overarching community sentiment was one of positivity and excitement and pride for being in Wellington. Our businesses were just excited for the future, excited for the direction. And while there were challenges that many acknowledged, it was an overall feeling of optimism and enthusiasm about the community's future. Now, these conversations are the beginning of ongoing dialogues and mark a moment in time. We're going to continue to seek to both understand the individual business needs and provide one-on-one support, as well as the shared experiences across Wellington businesses, so we can meet the needs of the business community and continue to increase Wellington's economic vitality. Thank you again to the businesses that share their experience and very thoughtful insights. Right. We also met with commercial realtor and developers. These folks had a great set of knowledge of both Wellington and across Northern Colorado and the communities. And I'll say I was really struck with how much of the similarities align between what our local businesses said and what they are seeing across in other communities. Would also like to thank them for the time, candor, and thoughtful insights that they shared. So similarly, kind of broken into topical areas. The interviewees that we spoke to addressed many competitive strengths of working with Wellington. They describe Wellington as a community with easy to work with and well-positioned to build on its many strengths. They identified helpful staff, strong relationship building, and a positive approach that supports a positive business experience and reinforces the long-term potential. So we had similar enthusiasm from our local businesses and the realtor community on Wellington's potential and future moving forward. Regional position and market context. Interviews describe Wellington as part of a broader regional market that presents both opportunities and bluntly competition with other towns. Interviewees observe that Wellington's strategic location, growing community, and relative affordability provides an opportunity to attract residents serving, locally connected, and industrial businesses. Interviewees also noted that regional dynamics influence business decisions, noting that some businesses will be pulled to other communities because of size, location, or different cost, tax, and regulation structures. Part of Wellington's strategic location is being placed in Larimer, very close to Weld, very close to Wyoming and other cities. So we get the benefit and the challenges with it. And then finally, site selection and project feasibility considerations. The professionals describe project feasibility and site selection decisions as dependent on many factors, including the business type. Whatever type of business it is will be influenced by certain factors. The market conditions, regional comparisons, cost, timing, and availability of the right space. The interviews noted that success is more likely when projects do match the current market realities and practical operating needs. So for next steps, continue to get feedback and alignment on the proposed roadmap, and then we'll continue to work on the efforts that support the near-term focus areas identified in the roadmap. We'll be analyzing the input and identifying particular actions, particularly that support the existing business community and helping them access resources, understand available data, and helping where we can. So thank you all very much for your time, and
Thank you so much for the presentation. I know a lot of us have been really looking forward to pursuing this more. We'll go around really quick and see if there's any questions or any follow-up items. Let's start with Trustee Cannon. Blackstone.
Yeah, I have a few, mostly around the business listening tour. As far as the folks that you spoke with, were any of them the like home business based businesses? Specifically, I'm thinking of like, I know we have across the street from me a daycare. There's some cottage food businesses in town. I'm not sure how many others are like home based businesses as opposed to like maybe their office is there. Were those folks kind of touched on this, or is that somebody?
That's a great question and something I should have clarified. This was physical or businesses with a physical commercial location.
Mhm.
I think as we move forward, understanding, what support and what needs our home-based businesses might benefit from would absolutely be something to explore.
Yeah, that's something that I think is something growing in Colorado right now is a lot of folks that, potentially can't afford a brick and mortar store, kind of like you kind of touched on, being able to start that base at home is something that I think there's a growing wave in Colorado, and I imagine, around the country. As far as those kind of market conditions, would you say that like out of these two, when you spoke on like business ready, would you say like because I feel like there's a high cost of renting a space, and then there's also just the availability of them. Which would you say is kind of like a higher kind of frustration for folks that are potentially wanting to open up a business, or both?
I think it would probably be very business dependent.
Sure.
Having the available space is, of course, maybe the first step, but then understanding the costs associated with rent, might be a reason why somebody can't rent available space.
Yeah, I feel like I've heard both. I've heard a lot of frustration from folks around town about the high cost of renting spaces in town. There's so many of them, especially if you go towards like the Meridian Trust area, like that's just a high threshold to be able to afford one of those spaces in the town. But yeah, I was just kind of curious if that one or the other really stuck out as a metric. Something that I saw in there that I'm kind of curious about was one of the critiques that you heard from businesses, and it was like preferential treatment. And I'm just kind of curious what that means or what you heard from folks.
So of course, perception, some businesses did feel that other businesses had communication that they didn't, maybe were recognized more than they were, maybe had more connections with folks either in the town staff or across the board, maybe more connections with other organizations. So definitely something that I think is, as we move forward, making sure that, again, resources are available and equally communicated.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's just something for us to kind of hear again from these businesses and kind of keep in mind as we're making, kind of other decisions or making plans and things. I had a couple other questions here. Oh, the commercial realtor interviews. It seems like those happened before the latest water rate changes. Is that something that you're potentially wanted to touch base with them again, now that we have the new water rates? Is that something kind of you guys have considered?
So I would say anything is a particular moment in time. No one during the interviews, we weren't looking at exact data points. Water did come up as across Colorado and many places, water is a key resource. And depending on the type of business, there might be a bigger impact. If it's something that we would want to study, particularly on on the town's particular fees, I think that would be probably a separate study.
Sure.
But it wasn't something that someone was looking at the exact rates as a comparison, more of just generally noting water is a precious resource anywhere.
Sure. No, that makes total sense. No, I think that's everything I have for now. I appreciate it.
Trustee Barrett.
Hi. So for commercial realtors, it feels like we have a lot of opportunities and then they just don't break the ground. Did any of them identify like a reoccurring, more specific, threshold that just, kind of makes them turn the different direction, when it comes to commercial development? Because when we're talking about breaking new ground, not even just occupying existing spaces, but we need to create new spaces for businesses. What about the feasibility would you say is the identifying factor that would make someone turn away?
So I don't think that there would be one factor that would turn away or stop a project or really cause one project to move forward. They identified that there are a multitude of factors that go into a project feasibility and
Yeah.
site selection. Everything from the actual timing, it could be the location itself in the town. It could even be what the
Yeah.
customer's coming with in terms of their capital stack and how they're financing their project. So it's a multitude, and I think as we
Is
move
there a
forward
way
with
to
that with
identify what would be the most common one though?
no, it wouldn't necessarily be one that I would want to promote as the topic or as the one. I think as we move forward and continue to work with commercial realtors as partners and developers, understanding their project specific needs. So
Customizing?
we could determine what gaps there are and what feasibility the town can consider partnering with. And
Okay.
again, not a specific example off the top, but I think it will probably be a little bit of a tailored approach, particularly for some of the larger projects.
Okay.
Trustee Moore.
Thank you. I think you touched on my thought exactly. 'Cause I wrote down, were at-home businesses included in these kinds of discussions? And how are we reaching the opinion or pain points of the many, many at-home businesses that would have a great deal of insight as to the barriers to entry into brick and mortars, or how we can help those businesses that are ready to take those steps and give them a pathway? Because I feel, as a small business owner myself, there is no manual or a way into really get in or know how to avoid some missteps when it comes to further developing your business. So I think it's important to consider the folks that are or that have already put in the work in their home businesses and the potential that they could bring to the community at large if they had a roadmap of sorts that would allow them to either expand or improve upon, even if they're not necessarily interested in becoming brick and mortar businesses, but to further reach the community that they're invested in. And if we can, as a town, help or provide guidance.
Trustee Moore.
Yes. Thank you again. I love all this planning. I know I say it every time, but it's so exciting to have plans. I think one thing that I also appreciated about this plan is the discussion or hitting on the topic of being friendly to business. I think, we've talked about it in the past, how important it is to be seen as a good partner and a welcoming partner and welcoming to businesses. And so I think for sure that's part of the story that we want to put out, and do everything we can. Like in the pilot programs, you have the admin barriers and finding ways that we can streamline processes, because that's what I've heard is that the process is cumbersome. And just like Trustee Moore stated, if we can help give a roadmap to them on how you can go from a small business to a brick and mortar, then that's all the better. So how can we do those things that can just help people along the way to be successful, and not hand-holding necessarily, but, really lift them up and do whatever we can to make sure that we're welcoming and also supportive. And then I would love to see at some point, and I don't know, I'm not going to put you on the spot now, but in 18 months, 2 years, what does success look like and feel like for you coming out of this plan? because this is a long-term, synthesize and plan could take a while, and pilot programs take a long time to put into place. And so what will make you feel the most successful when you reflect on this in 2 years? And like I said, you don't have to answer that now, but I would love to know that from you at some point.
Well, I do have a kind of a quick answer. Either having completed or in the process of working towards a strategic plan that includes everyone's input and that people are on the same page and that we are marching forward with a plan with specific goals. The roadmap outlines some near-term outcomes, but having a plan that we can say, this is really what we're marching towards, and having those indicators to show the progress along the way. I also like planning.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Ms. Magargel. Really appreciate your presentation here tonight. I just want to say I certainly like the plan and what you've got so far. Obviously, we want to be good partners with our businesses and grow our local economy. Obviously, we've got a lot of leakage that goes down to Fort Collins and these types of things that we'd obviously like to retain here. So I guess I'd just start with if there are any hurdles to a particular business coming here or primary employer, any of those types of things, and even if they have specific asks from a business perspective or anything like that, I think the board would want to just understand what those things are, or if there's any roadblocks or barriers that we can assist with. I think that'd be great for the board to know, just to take under consideration. But I, like I said, definitely like the plan, and specifically under the synthesize and plan section, you had listed communication and marketing plans. I think that's going to be very important to get us out there and market ourselves. I'm also just kind of curious, and I don't know, from your perspective, I don't know if it's worth reaching out to some of these entities. I don't, cold calling certain businesses and that sort of thing, and just saying, hey, would you consider Wellington for, I don't know, say King Supers or something like that? Would you consider coming to Wellington and maybe just kind of understanding what their requirements might be for such a thing? I know certain businesses have, population requirements, for example, right? You maybe have to be over 15,000 people or something like that. So just maybe kind of understanding what some of those hurdles might be, just so that we kind of know for future planning as far as that goes. And then, and certainly if that's anything that the board can help with, I mean, I'm happy to pick up the phone and that sort of thing. So if you have any ideas as far as that goes, certainly, feel free to reach out. So the other thing, and maybe this is less business development oriented, but I heard Trustee Blackstone mention the topic of preferential treatment. And one of the things I wanted to, and I've heard this concern from a few different business owners in regard to sales tax enforcement and licenses, specifically regarding food trucks and these types of things. I think it's important that all of our businesses are able to play by the same rules, so to speak. And I don't want to, I know for us, it's a difficult position, right? Because a lot of those things come in kind of after hours, and we don't necessarily have the staff to be able to enforce those things after hours. So I'd be curious if maybe we can come up with some creative strategies regarding, so for example, if you are a business that happens to host food trucks or something like that, and just throwing this out there, maybe if we could have those businesses collect just a picture, photocopy of sales tax licenses for those food trucks that they host. And that way, when they come back to renew either their business license or liquor license or something like that, maybe we could kind of tie those together. That way we don't have to have somebody that's actually doing the enforcement. Really, the business then is doing the enforcement for the town. And I think that might just the thought, and maybe something for the board to consider going forward. But other than that, I like the plan. So appreciate it.
I am especially excited about the synthesize and plan components, mentioning communication and marketing. I really have always thought that we needed a branding initiative of, consider Wellington, find your place. All the things that we've done through Main Street have been really great taglines that people can get behind and kind of have an understanding of where we are and who we are. So I'm hoping that some of those initiatives come out of that can really help to solicit businesses and solicit support for our town. I also have a little concern about, and Mayor Pro Tem didn't necessarily say this in the perspective of concern, but I'm going to maybe elevate it to concern of if this is a 2-year plan, then might that mean that we're 2 years away from initiating really big potential projects that we know are necessary for our town? So I would hate for outreach to those major organizations that have expressed interests or should obviously be on the list of people we should be pursuing for Wellington to wait to follow a pilot program. I feel like we need to be making those connections immediately, and, you know, meeting their requirements immediately, and maybe catering a separate track of this plan to these just really obvious directions that we know that Wellington needs to be approaching from the perspective of soliciting new businesses, any kind of primary employers, or anybody that could use space of current developments that are already underway or awaiting groundbreaking. I just don't want to wait until we have a plan to then start initiating some of these contacts. I feel like initiate them now and immediately, cater to those, and use that experience as part of the engagement and lessons that we're learning on how to do it going forward. So I'm sure you've considered that already. But just from my perspective, I don't want to wait. And I know planning is important, and I know bringing all the information is important, but I also know that there are some things that are just so obvious that we don't need to study to know that that's some of the steps that Wellington has in our near future. So I just want to put some emphasis on that as well. Other projects that have recently really brought the business community together, obviously with Cleveland Construction. I've been constantly impressed with the community that the businesses have formed in order to rally for the occasion. And I think that community, that sense of community would be really helpful for the home-based businesses as well. Today, even I think Midnight Glow is like, hey, is there any small business get-togethers? And I know that Main Street really has a mechanism, and in order to do a lot of these things, they have an entire group that supports that area, but maybe not necessarily outside of Main Street or the home-based businesses. And I think that the town has done such an amazing job of facilitating these meetup, get-together, community building, business opportunities. So I might put that on the list of, again, things that we can be doing in tandem that have already shown success, but also helps people to help themselves by creating their own partnerships and connections, and then just encouraging them to do that as much as possible, while at the same opportunity providing the opportunity to inform or help from the town perspective of, hey, let's get all these businesses together, but also we're going to tell you about a major project that's going on in town. Get all you guys together. Also, this is how you do your licensing. So that community function has just seemed so powerful to me. So again, I don't have the data to back that up, but from the feedback I receive, it's been just so well received. And people really have participated a lot. So I really love that. So any way to, it's one thing for us to say, how can we help you? It's also another way to say, how can we empower you to help each other? So, and I think we can as much be just as powerful in that space as well. So, but I love this. I think that we have a lot of great things in our future. And I know, like you said, you're at the engage and listen and you're moving forward on all these things. So we have good things to look forward to, but those are just the items I think are a little bit more, need to be expedited a bit, or I don't know exactly, but that's my feedback. Yes, please.
Sorry that, as I'm listening to you, Cody, or you could maybe answer this, or you don't have to. It's very on the spot-ish. I'm really interested to know, I know this is something that we talked about a lot on Planning Commission, but how many commercial lots we have available if someone were to want to come into town?
I don't have the numbers off the top of my head. We
Yeah.
do have in your quarterly building permit activity reports, there's a table at the end that shows commercial land availability by acreage and number of lots as either buildable or in the pipeline. So we have that information tracked. Wellington's a small enough community that anyone, our staff especially, knows which properties are currently available, listed, or pocket listings, or may become available. We have a lot of that information where if we get a specific question, we can pretty quickly dial up, this is the information that those prospective businesses or realtors would need to know about those sites. So while it's not a listed document that we publish, we have a lot of information on that we can provide.
You did answer. Okay. Trustee Barrett, did you have another comment? I saw you earlier. Okay, Trustee Cannon.
Yeah, thank you. I didn't have a question about this report, but I do have some comments about it. Thank you, Mayor Daley. You put it very succinctly there when you said that we have immediate needs now. We can't be waiting 2 years for this to happen. 8 years ago, we did a study with Buxton, and you've probably seen that report. Okay, that study took about 4 months, and they came out and they said, here's where you're leaking commercial business, and here's the markets you should be looking for. And they gave us an immediate roadmap that we could act on. And we started acting on it during that time. Now, several of those did not come to fruition, but I think this plan is a little risk averse. We gathered a lot of information, which is good, but pilot programs and 2 years out, we need to be moving. We need to be moving right away. And quite frankly, I think in our next budget discussion, we might want to do another market leakage analysis to give us the information and the ammunition that staff needs so they can go out and pursue those. Because 8 years ago, they didn't say King Super, they said Safeway in a city market. And I understand that there are some, we're not going to get a big Home Depot or nothing like that because of, population or something like that. But there are other markets. Tiny little Timoth, and I've said this before, tiny little Timoth got a Costco and a Walmart and all these other places like it. Now they have some good location, but we share the same commercial corridor they do. And I think there's things that we can be doing actively now to start pursuing and recruiting those type of businesses, because waiting, it can take a year or more to have a conversation with that business, for them to locate that, to do their analysis, to do their marketing, to do all of their capital planning, to put their finances in order. And then there's still things that we need to be doing at the same time that are outside of this, because on one of your plans there, you said, now I'll find it for you exactly, that small incentives won't make an impact. You want to reduce somebody's impact fee for water or something like that. That's not going to make that of an impact. But if we have a discussion, and I think probably in the next couple of days in our strategic planning, if we talk about economic prosperity for the town, we probably need to have a discussion like we did 2 years ago about home rule. But this time, maybe we talk about tax increment financing through a DDA or URA. So those are large incentives, major incentives. They can make a major impact and a major difference. A lot of these things have to happen hand in hand. We have to set the stage. We have to set the board has to set those kind of policies in that direction, but also starts moving on those type of incentives and that type of foundation. And I call it economic infrastructure, so that we can recruit businesses and we can be responsive quickly. And I like the report that talks about staff is easy to work with, and I'm seeing a lot of that. And I think we've got a great staff there. But I think at the same time, we need to keep pressing forward with economic development. We just sat through an hour and a half of PROST master plan studies where they're talking about, okay, facilities and such like that. They're going to come back in about a month with a capital plan. Well, all you have to do is look at our budget to realize that money's tight. So what do we need to do to start putting the finances in the city coffers so that we can pay for these amenities and these park and such like that? So I think in for me, I would like to see a more immediate plan for recruiting businesses, commercial businesses, retail businesses, brick and mortar. We've got our land use code talks about future areas that would be used for commercial. I think there's a lot of opportunities, but we just need to start acting on it. And at some point, I think we've got a lot of information already. So I'd like to get moving a little bit faster.
Well, I do, perhaps maybe I overemphasized planning and didn't emphasize enough of the action associated with this plan. But to the point of the communication and marketing, it is absolutely that. It's also responding to businesses that do connect. I think my recommendation prior to taking on additional studies would be to understand exactly what information we think we don't have, because there is a lot of data that is available coming up when I say strategic plan, it is being very purposeful in how we are spending money, what information we need, as well as taking actions that are responsive. So certainly not risk averse, but also want to be mindful of where dollars are spent to support a plan and being purposeful with our actions.
That's wonderful. And just the listening section alone is creating more partners in the community. So I think that's wonderful. So thank you so much for everything you're doing.
Yes.
Dr. Bird, did you have something to say?
I did just want to add, Liz was just starting to get to it, so I wanted to just kind of bring it home too. A lot of the emphasis that you're seeing in the presentation tonight was based on that listening. We want to hear from the businesses. What are they experiencing? What's working? What's not working? It's not that we're not doing a lot of the things that have been discussed. There's a lot of effort that we didn't present on in this, and that phase one that we're already working on and taking those initial steps. We do need funding to undertake studies and things, and that's something that's not in your current year budget. So we're not tackling big studies and projects of that nature because we don't have the budget for that. But it is something that we're at the end of that roadmap. That's something we're trying to stage this up for when budget season comes around in October, that we are going to be seeking funding for those initiatives to take those things into consideration, unless funding came from another source mid-year that could accelerate them. And the comment that Mayor Daley made also about what we want to be able to do something now. We still have the ability to enter into arm's length agreements with a business to use tools that are already at our disposal. We don't have a policy yet, and that's what the roadmap is identifying, that we want to have a well thought out policy that's purpose driven, performance based, and meets the needs of the community. But until we have that in place and fully vetted, we absolutely can enter partnerships with businesses for a site specific. If they need to close a gap on financing, if we know the gap and we have the business and we're working with them, we can enter into agreements that allow us to do that now.
Great.
We don't have those opportunities talking to us right at this moment, but we have the ability to do that when those opportunities come along.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. On to the consent agenda. Ms. Clerk, can you please read the title of the items on the consent agenda?
April 14th, 2026 meeting minutes, April 21st, 2026 meeting minutes, and resolution number 16-2026, a resolution of the town of Wellington, Colorado, making appointments to Parks, Recreation, Open Space and Trails, Planning Commission, and the Finance Advisory Board.
Can I hear a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Clerk, can you do the roll call, please?
Trustee Moore?
Here.
Yes. Trustee Blackstone?
Yes.
Trustee Cannon?
Yes.
Trustee Moyer?
Yes.
Trustee Barrett?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Mason?
Yes.
Mayor Daley?
Yes.
Madam Mayor, that motion passes.
Thank you. On to action items. Will the clerk please read the title of E1?
Resolution number 15-2026, a resolution of the town of Wellington, Colorado, amending the town of Wellington financial management policies effective May 12th, 2026.
Nick Redavid, Finance Director and Town Treasurer, will present this ordinance.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and Trustees. As stated, I'm Nick Redavid, Finance Director and Town Treasurer. Before you tonight is an amendment to the financial management policies that were adopted in November 2025 and became effective at the start of this year. I want to take a little more time than usual on this matter, not because the amendment itself is complicated, but with new members on the board, this may be your first opportunity to see the town's financial management policies in their complete context. As such, this item is before you tonight as an action item rather than on the consent agenda. Financial management policies tend to be the kind of document everyone is glad exists, but few people ever want to talk about at length. That said, from a governance perspective, these policies are foundational. They support stability, transparency, continuity, and public trust. They are how the board sets expectations around financial stewardship, and they are one of the primary tools used by auditors, grantors, and rating agencies to assess how seriously an organization takes fiscal oversight. These are policies, not procedures, establishing guardrails for oversight while allowing staff to manage day-to-day implementation. So while tonight's amendment itself is narrow, the framework it sits within is important. Prior to last year, the town's fiscal guidance existed across 3 separate documents: a purchasing policy previously updated in 2022, a fund balance policy adopted later that year, and a set of financial policies approved in 2023. Each of those documents addressed a specific area, but they were developed at different times by several finance department leaders and staff members, updated independently of each other, and often did not always speak the same language. Over time, that created duplication, gaps, and inconsistencies. Beginning in early 2025, with new finance department leadership in place and supported by the deputy town administrator, staff began the effort to consolidate these documents into a single, cohesive, and comprehensive set of financial management policies. The goal was not to radically change how the town manages its finances, but rather to clearly document existing best practices, align them with Government Finance Officers Association guidance, and ensure the board's expectations were clearly articulated and consistently applied. That work involved collaboration across all departments, detailed internal review, discussion with the Finance Advisory Board, a work session with the board, and ultimately formal adoption. As part of that process, the board provided specific direction that materially shaped the final document, including defining a general fund debt guideline, setting risk tolerance thresholds with purchasing and approval limits, defining guidelines for capital improvement project spending, adding successor definitions, and clarifying that Appendix A may be updated through consent agenda, though tonight it is updated with this action item. On November 12th, 2025, the board adopted Resolution Number 44, 2025, formally approving the Town of Wellington financial management policies effective January 1st, 2026. The amendment before you tonight is limited and administrative. However, even minor amendments must be adopted formally because these are board-level governance tools. This update adds the senior communications and marketing specialist role and does not change any other thresholds, limits, or controls. The January 1st, 2026 version of the policies with track changes is provided in the packet for reference and transparency. Staff recommends adoption of Resolution Number 15, 2026 as presented. Thank you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Does anybody have any questions for Mr. David? Yes.
No, thank you. No, thank you. No questions, but thank you so much for that explanation. I think it was really helpful to kind of get a snapshot of how decision-making is happening as new people. So thank you.
I also have a comment too. You know, I've worked in a lot of communities, and these are probably the best financial policies that I've seen, most comprehensive. You know, when I was first hired here in 2017, I walked into the finance director's offices and I said, "What's our debt policy?" He said, "I don't know." I said, "What's our staffing allocation?" He said, "How many people we got?" I said, "What's our credit rating?" He said, "What's a credit rating?" what we've done here with these financial policies is exactly what you said, but it also helps us when we take on challenges that require funding through bonds and so forth like that. With strategic policies like this that we follow, that are adopted, that we adhere to, we can get loans at a much lower basis point than other communities that don't have these kind of policies. So I am very proud of the work that staff has done on this, and the Finance Advisory Board with weighing in on that, and everyone involved with staff who created this document. And great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Comments? Fine. Go ahead.
You sort of touched on it, and I just want to say a bit more loudly that this is really an amazing step in transparency for the finances of our town, which have been questioned from time to time, but it's hard to question when you have a manual of how these decisions are made. And so I appreciate having them all in one place and the thoroughness, and shout out that our 2025 audit is going to be done soon, hopefully. Good job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any comments from the public this evening? As a note for anybody online, there is nobody here from the public present, and I will take that as a confidence in our practices. Thank you. All right, any final comments? May I hear a motion to approve this ordinance?
I move to adopt resolution number 15-2026, a resolution of the town of Wellington, Colorado, amending the town of Wellington financial management policies effective May 12th, 2026.
I second.
Will the clerk please call the roll?
Trustee Moyer,
Yes.
Trustee Blackstone,
Yes.
Trustee Barrett,
Yes.
Trustee Cannon,
Yes.
Trustee Moore,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Mason,
Yes.
Mayor Daley.
Yes.
Madam Mayor, that motion passes.
Thank you. On to reports. Our town attorney, do you have a report for us?
There
this
is
evening?
no report from the town attorney at this meeting. There will be next meeting.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Town Administrator Garcia.
Good evening, Mayor and Trustees. As a reminder, we have our strategic planning sessions coming up Thursday and Friday. Final information will get sent out to you tomorrow through text and email, just as a reminder of locations and things like that. I want to thank Billy and his team for the work that they did tonight on that PROST master plan draft. That was really great information, and I love how all of the pieces are coming together with the various plans that we're doing. They all work together to bring us to the place where we need to be related to economic development. So it's the housing needs assessment, the comprehensive plan, the transportation master plan that's coming up. I mean, all those pieces work together to create a great foundation for Wellington for us to move forward. So really excited about that. And Liz has been doing a fantastic job. You know, her role is really trying to find that gap. What are we missing? Where do we need to fill in? And she's working regionally, collaboratively with the other entities and with organizations across Larimer County to learn more about how Northern Colorado works and what are the gaps in services or businesses for Northern Colorado in our region, which might be helpful and useful for us. So thank you, everybody.
You're absolutely raising the bar of Wellington, so I very much appreciate those. Thank you so much. All right, board reports. So this time, everybody has the opportunity to talk during board reports, just so you guys know. If you have attended a meeting that you are the liaison of, this would be the time to share any findings or highlights from those meetings. If there's other things going on in the community or any other just announcements that you would like to make personally, this would be the time to do that. That was a lot to tell you right now. So if you're not prepared for a specific board report, that's fine. We'll try to keep them concise, which is something I've not always done in the past. But we'll start with Trustee Moyer. All right. Okay.
I just want to thank everyone at this dais for your grace for me over the last couple of weeks. I appreciate it very much and the support that you've shown. Yeah, that's it. It's nice to have support.
Family is the most important thing. Thank you. Trustee Moore.
No updates. The market's coming up here, fast approaching. So just keeping that in mind and super excited for the season. Thank you.
Trustee Blackstone.
Yeah, I attended as the new liaison for the Wellington Housing Authority and the Wellington Community Housing. There's two things that I think are worth talking about here. One with the mix-up of having the two board members will have an opening soon. I believe there's been communication with Patty on getting that announced to the town and publicly made available for people to put in their applications. I know that there's also been some communication from the Housing Catalyst, manages our properties, to also potentially put out some advertisement on their side and potentially use it as a way to kind of advertise the housing authority in general. I think that's a fun idea. Give us a little bit of kind of community kind of outreach. There's also a couple interesting things that happened. We had, I think it was like 6 units that were open. I think what's important about that is that it's not that we had a less of a need for those units. It was all due to, I think most of them were due to HUD limits, where you potentially have a unit where it's made for 2 folks, and then you have one of the houses, one of the partners passed away, so they had to now move the single person now into a smaller unit. When that happens, there's also significant turnaround costs and time to get new people in, so that's where those openings kind of come up. There was also a push to kind of refill the list of available folks, and that went out. I think we did a good job of kind of putting that out there on social media for folks to be able to put their name into that raffle. So, fingers crossed that those that are in the kind of greatest need get that availability. Besides that, I think just overall it's a great group to work with, and hopefully there's more on the horizon. So thanks.
Thank you, sir. Trustee Cannon.
Thank you. I reached out and spoke with John Kafalis at his community conversations last Thursday and got the name of the director, Commissioner Stevens with Laramie County, as the chair of the MPO. I'll be reaching out to her next week to have a meeting, and also Patty Garcia, Administrator Garcia, sent me the contact information for Elizabeth Relford, their executive director for the MPO. The only thing that I haven't been getting yet that I'd still like to get is any past emails about the TPR, and as far as member list and so forth, and schedules of when they're going to be meeting, so I can make sure I don't miss that meeting. Thank you.
Trustee Barrett.
Well, I don't have any announcements in regards to any boards just yet, but I do know that the Parks and Recreation now has an Instagram, and I encourage everyone to follow it because it's really nice on social media to be able to keep up with the Parks and Rec department and events for your children. So that's something I'm excited about. So great job, guys.
Mayor Pro Tem. Then okay. The announcements I wanted to make are that the landfill, the northern landfill, somebody called it Wellington landfill, but that's not necessarily the name. I don't know if I want that to be what people say. But yeah, will be opening in July. So that is a great thing for the county from the perspective of having more capacity for waste. There's a lot to that project that I have a lot of history with, just having been on the policy council in the past. My biggest concerns and questions that I have for years now been advocating for the town of Wellington are in regards to traffic and pollution, essentially, just trash blowing primarily from this site, which happens to be just northwest of Wellington, right? And given our general direction of wind, that puts us kind of right in the area of where wind would blow. They have assured us how they will, the policy for closing the plant in general, based off wind thresholds, and the process that they use for cleaning up the area outside of it. I don't know if anybody's driven to Eaton recently and saw the disaster of a mess of the landfill and all the surrounding area. And it's disgusting. And we would not tolerate that. I just want that to be super clear. That is not something that they think we are at risk of, but it is constantly in my mind and something we will continue to advocate for and make sure that they're considering Wellington. The other thing is for increased traffic. The process is that trash will continue to be collected at the transfer station that is south of Fort Collins at the current landfill location. They will compact and combine that trash and then bring it up I-25 to Owl Canyon to deliver it to the landfill. But commercial haulers can also deliver trash directly to the northern landfill as well, meaning that they may or could, because they're not bound to the traffic requirements and the route of Larimer County trucks, go through Wellington. And that's also not acceptable for me, given the wear and tear that would incur on our roads, not to mention leaky trash trucks that we've seen in the past. So that's something I want us to be very aware of that is occurring, and we might start seeing impacts of that within the next month or so. Also, given that this will be the first sale of the landfill, and it's on the furthest north side of it too. So there's a lot of risks that really aren't going to be so apparent. They're also considering, and they're trying to figure out how to manage this, but that Wellington residents or residents within a certain mile radius of the new landfill, we could use that directly as private folks, not through a commercial use. So rather than driving all the way to the Trilby or south side of Fort Collins, we could drive directly to the north landfill, but it'd only be available for public use for certain residents, Wellington being within that group. So they're trying to determine how to do that by zip code or by proximity or things. So they're working through those details, but that's also been something we've been advocating for a very long time. It makes no sense for us to drive it all the way up there. I think those are the major updates. We got that through Kafalis's conversations this last week that he does monthly or every other month at the T-Bar. I'll make sure everybody has that on their schedules if that's something you would like to attend in the future. And we also heard from the Extension Office. So great meeting. This Friday is Mingle on Main. So great opportunity to go shopping downtown and spend time and money at our local businesses. So that's Friday starting at 4. And then also, if you haven't had a chance yet, go look at the schedule for the movies in the parks that Parks and Rec is hosting this summer, because summer is almost here. So those are starting very soon. It's starting at Kids to Parks Day, the 24th. It's a Saturday. Next. This Saturday. Oh, I thought it was starting on Kids to Park Day. Okay. Well, rather than using me for your scheduling needs, please go to the appropriate place to look at the schedule for movies in the park. They are starting this month, apparently this Saturday. So I hope you guys can make it. Those are super fun. And that's all the updates that I have for today. So thank you all for being here. I'm very excited for strategic planning this week. And we have a very great group. So I think we're already doing a fantastic job. Your staff communications, other ones are in your packets, including the NOCO Humane first quarter 2026 service report. So if you have any questions, please email, or if you have anything right now, let me know. I skipped that on accident. All right. Now we will move on to executive session. I want to thank all of those who are attending online. Will the clerk please read the title for item G1?
Executive session pursuant to section 24-6-402 4B CRS for purposes of receiving legal advice on specific legal questions related to metropolitan districts.
Do I hear a motion to go into executive session?
So moved.
Second.
Will the clerk please call the roll?
Trustee Cannon,
Yes.
Trustee Moore,
Yes.
Trustee Blackstone,
Yes.
Trustee Moyer,
Yes.
Trustee Barrett,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Mason,
Yes.
Mayor Daly.
Yes.
Madam Mayor, that motion passes.
For the public, the board is now entering the executive session. Members of the public in person will be asked to leave, and the virtual meeting will end.